Chapter 1. The Message That Shouldn't Exist. The Calm Before the Storm. The Hyperion's edge glided through the dark vacuum of space, its hull gleaming under the distant light of a dying star. Inside the ship, Captain Elias Vance sat in his command chair, sipping from a mug of synthetic coffee, his expression thoughtful as he reviewed the latest galactic news reports. Things had been relatively quiet in this sector of space. No major wars, no planetary revolts, and most importantly no human colonies under threat. That was why he and his crew were here. The Terran Peace Corps operated outside the bounds of bureaucratic politics, taking it upon themselves to intervene wherever human lives were at risk. Elias had seen the worst of the galaxy human trafficking rings, warlords enslaving colonists, and corrupt alien officials using human workers like disposable tools. Every time, he had fought to stop it, and every time, he had won. But nothing could have prepared him for the nightmare that was about to unfold. "Captain," a voice called from the bridge's control deck. Elias turned. His communications officer, Yelena Koslov, was staring at her console, her brows furrowed in confusion. "We just intercepted a distress beacon," she said. "But something's off." Elias straightened. "Define off." Yelena tapped her screen, pulling up the transmission. "It's coming from a deep space prison colony," she said. "A classified one. And it's human." Elias' heart stopped. "Run that again," he said, setting his mug aside. Yelena replayed the transmission. A child's voice, terrified and shaking with fear. "Please, someone, help us. They took us from our colony. We don't know why. They're hurting us. Please, if anyone can hear this, please come." The voice broke into sobs before the transmission cut out. Silence settled over the bridge like a suffocating weight. Elias stood, his hands clenched into fists, rage already burning inside him. "Who the hell thought imprisoning human kids was a good idea?" he growled. His crew exchanged worried glances. "Sir," Yelena hesitated. "We don't know who's behind this yet. It could be Dash." "I don't care who it is," Elias snapped. "You don't kidnap children and expect to get away with it." A new voice chimed in. Lieutenant Cale Drayton, his weapons specialist. A grizzled veteran with a cybernetic arm and a permanent scowl, Cale had seen just as much horror in the galaxy as Elias. "Sir," Cale said, crossing his arms, "we don't even know what kind of prison this is. If it's an official Galactic Council facility, we'll be up against a fortress. If it's an illegal one, then whoever's running it won't hesitate to kill those kids the moment they know we're coming." Elias knew Cale was right, but that didn't matter. What mattered was getting those kids out no matter what it took. "Plot a course," he ordered. "We're getting those kids back." No one hesitated. No one questioned him. Because they knew. No force in the galaxy could stand against the wrath of a human when their own were in danger. Arrival at the prison world. 4 hours later, the Hyperion's edge dropped out of hyperspace. And they saw it. The prison world of Kareth 7. A barren, lifeless rock orbiting a dying sun. The entire planet was wrapped in a massive artificial shield, protecting the atmosphere and ensuring no one got in or out without authorization. Elias' jaw tightened as he studied the enormous orbital station floating above the planet's surface. It was an immense fortress, bristling with turrets, docking bays, and thousands of armed patrol ships. Yelena whistled. "That's a damn war zone, Captain." Elias nodded. "And those kids are in the middle of it." Cale grinned darkly. "Then let's break in." But first, they needed intel. "Send out the recon drones," Elias ordered. "I want to know exactly what kind of hellhole we're dealing with." Minutes later, the drones sent back data. What they found made Elias' blood boil. The prison wasn't just holding human children, it was experimenting on them. Testing human biology. Running brutal survival tests. Pushing them to the limit. All for alien research. Elias stood. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. "They took our children. To use as lab rats?" His crew went dead silent. Then Cale spoke, his voice dark and lethal. "They just declared war." Elias turned to his team. "Suit up," he said, rage burning in his eyes. "We're going in, and we're burning this place to the ground." The battle plan. Elias and his crew had one advantage: the enemy didn't know they were coming. They devised a plan. Disable the planetary defense grid. Infiltrate the main facility. Extract the children and destroy the prison. It was insane. Reckless. But Elias wasn't backing down. And neither was his crew. Kale grinned as he loaded his rifle. I've always wanted to see what happens when an entire prison realizes they messed with the wrong species. Yelena cracked her knuckles. Let's give him hell. Elias stepped onto the drop ship, his heart pounding. Hold on, kids. We're coming. The drop. As the drop ship plunged through the artificial atmosphere, alarms blared across the prison world. The prison's defense grid came online, turrets locking onto the intruding vessel. Elias gritted his teeth. Then boom. Explosions ripped through the turrets, Kale's sabotage drones taking them out before they could fire. The dropship crashed through the prison's outer defenses, slamming into the main courtyard. As the doors blasted open, Elias Vance stepped out first. And he was angry. You imprisoned human kids? Are you crazy? The alien guards barely had time to react before bullets and plasma fire filled the air. The war for the children had begun. And humanity's vengeance was only just getting started. Chapter 2. The War for the Children begins. The drop into hell. The Hyperion's edge had landed hard, its impact shaking the entire prison courtyard. Smoke and fire billowed into the air as security sirens blared across the Kareth 7 prison complex. And standing in the middle of it all, Captain Elias Vance, armed and furious. You imprisoned human kids? Are you crazy? The alien guards barely had time to react before Kale Drayton's rifle lit up the night. A single high-impact plasma round shot straight through the first guard's skull, sending him collapsing onto the ground. Looks like they weren't expecting visitors, Kale growled, stepping off the dropship. His cybernetic arm flexed, steam hissing from the built-in energy modulator. Yelena Koslov was right behind him, deploying an electromagnetic dampener to scramble the prison's security sensors. We have 2 minutes before they figure out how to override the jamming, she said, voice sharp and professional. After that, the entire complex will be on top of us. Elias lifted his rifle. Then we move fast. Storming the prison. The prison courtyard was massive, surrounded by high-energy fences and turret towers, all designed to keep prisoners inside, not to keep attackers out. Elias and his team didn't hesitate. They rushed forward, their boots pounding against the concrete floor. More alien guards emerged from the watchtowers, shouting in their guttural language. But Elias didn't need a translator to understand what they were saying. They were terrified. Contact! One of them shrieked, lifting a pulse cannon. Elias fired first. His plasma rounds burned straight through the alien's armor, dropping him instantly. Kale followed up, throwing an explosive charge into the first tower. Boom! The watchtower collapsed in a fireball, its occupants screaming as they were engulfed in flames. Elias didn't stop. Push forward. Secure the main hall. Yelena led the way, hacking into the prison's external door controls, bypassing the lock in seconds. The heavy blast doors slid open. Inside, the nightmare truly began. The horror of Block Delta. Elias and his team stormed into the prison's main corridor, weapons raised. The moment they entered Block Delta, the stench hit them first, a mix of blood, sweat, and something far worse. Then they saw the cages. Rows upon rows of metal containment cells, stacked like cargo containers. Each one held a child thin, malnourished, and terrified beyond belief. Their faces were hollow, their eyes filled with a despair no child should ever know. Jesus Christ, Yelena whispered, her face pale. Elias felt something deep inside him snap. His hands shook with rage. These weren't prisoners. These were kids. And the aliens who did this? They were about to learn why you never mess with humans. Elias grabbed the nearest guard, a tall, insectoid creature with 4 eyes and quivering mandibles. He slammed the alien against the wall, pressing his rifle against its chest. Who ordered this? Elias roared. The alien screeched in terror, trying to struggle. IIW, we were just following directives. Elias' finger tightened on the trigger. Whose directives? The alien trembled. The Directorate. The Council of Genetic Purity. Kale snarled. You kidnapped children for some sick genetic experiments? The alien whimpered. We're studying human biology. Learning why you are so resilient. Please, I was only a scientist dash. Elias didn't hesitate. Boom. The alien's head exploded, painting the wall with dark blue ichor. No more warnings, Elias growled. We get the kids out. Then we burn this place to the ground. The fight for freedom. Yelena worked fast, unlocking the containment cells as Elias and Kale covered the doors. One by one, the children stumbled out thin, bruised, some too weak to walk. Captain? A little girl whispered, her voice barely audible. Are you here to take us home? Elias knelt down. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice firm but kind. Yes, and no one will ever hurt you again. A tear slid down her face. Then the alarms blared. Reinforcements incoming. Kale shouted. The prison guards had mobilized. Hundreds of heavily armed alien enforcers poured into the corridors, their rifles glowing with deadly energy. Elias stood up, shielding the kids behind him. Get ready to fight, he said, voice like iron. Kale cocked his rifle. I thought you'd never ask. And then, hell erupted. A battle of rage and vengeance. The prison halls exploded into chaos. Kale took point, his cybernetic arm activating its energy cannon, blasting through rows of alien guards. Yelena provided cover fire, her shots precise as she dropped snipers from the balconies. Elias charged forward, dodging energy blasts, slamming a knife straight into an enemy's throat. The kids huddled together, too scared to move. Stay down, Elias ordered, shoving a boy behind a stack of metal crates. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. A high-level alien commander entered the hall, and he was wearing human bones as armor. Elias' world went red. The alien laughed. You think you can take them back? They belong to us now. Elias sprinted forward. The commander raised a plasma spear. Elias tore it from his hands and drove it straight into his chest. The alien's eyes widened, then dimmed as Elias ripped the spear out, letting the body collapse in a pool of green blood. No one touches our children and lives. The final push. With the commander dead, the remaining guards hesitated. Then the Hyperion's edge reappeared in orbit and bombarded the prison with firepower. The walls shook as explosions tore through the facility. Kale grinned. Time to go. Elias scooped up a weakened child, carrying her as his crew led the others toward the exit. One by one, the human children were freed. They boarded the dropship as the entire prison collapsed behind them, and Elias never looked back. The Hyperion's edge roared into space, leaving behind a burning ruin. Kareth, 7 would never hold another prisoner again. The message to the galaxy. Back on the Hyperion's edge, Elias sat with the children, his rage still simmering beneath his skin. He recorded a message to the Galactic Council. You kidnapped our children. You experimented on them. We are not diplomats. We are not here to negotiate. We are human. And if you ever come for our young again, we will burn your world to the ground. The message was sent, and the galaxy would never forget. Chapter 3. The Wrath of Humanity. The galaxy reacts to the massacre. The Terran Peace Corps' transmission spread like wildfire. Captain Elias Vance's message broadcast across every major galactic network, intercepted by every faction in power, shook the very foundation of the universe. You kidnapped our children. You experimented on them. We are not diplomats. We are not here to negotiate. We are human. And if you ever come for our young again, we will burn your world to the ground. The Hyperion's edge had barely returned to Terran space before the repercussions began. The Terran Republic's response. The president of the Terran Republic, Lin Yao, stood before a massive crowd on Earth, her expression steely and unyielding. Behind her, a holographic projection displayed the horrors of Kareth, 7, the starved, trembling children, the blood-stained cells, the shattered remains of the alien prison. Billions watched. Billions raged. This was not an accident, President Lin Yao said, her voice carrying through every Terran world. This was not the act of pirates or slavers. This was sanctioned. This was organized. And this was a declaration of war. Thunderous roars of anger erupted from the crowd. Burn them. No more diplomacy. Humanity will not forgive. Across every Terran colony, military fleets activated full war readiness. Terran warships mobilized. Battle stations went online. Even non-military vessels were armed. The Terran Republic had been quiet for decades. But now they were angry. And an angry humanity was the most dangerous thing in the universe. Inside the war room, humanity's next move. Inside the Terran High Command, The most powerful military leaders gathered around a massive holographic map of the galaxy. Elias Vance stood at the center, arms crossed, face hardened. This wasn't just some rogue faction, he said, voice sharp. Kareth 7 was operated by the Council of Genetic Purity, a secret branch of the Galactic Council. Fleet Admiral Juno Cade, a veteran of the Orion Wars, exhaled sharply. Then we need to hit them where it hurts. General Dmitry Volkov, head of Terran ground forces, growled. I say we storm their homeworld, drag their leaders into the streets, and let every human colony watch them beg for mercy. No, Elias said, shaking his head. The room fell silent. Elias stepped forward. We don't just fight a war, he said. We make an example. We don't just attack. We make them fear ever touching a human again. Admiral Cade's eyes narrowed. And how do you propose we do that? Elias turned to the holographic map and pointed. We take Novrax 5. The room froze. The target. Novrax 5. Novrax 5 was a fortified Planet A major stronghold of the Galactic Council's military power. It housed 50,000 Council soldiers, high-tech defense systems, experimental alien warships. No one had ever dared attack it, and Elias was proposing they storm it head-on. Admiral Cade smirked. Vance, I like the way you think. General Volkov cracked his knuckles. When do we start? Elias grinned darkly. Now. The fleet moves. War comes to Novrax 5. Within 24 hours, the Terran war fleet launched into hyperspace. 3,000 warships, planetary siege carriers, tactical strike teams. Humanity was coming, and this time, they weren't holding back. The Galactic Council scrambled to respond. They had expected diplomatic outrage. They had not expected a full-scale invasion. By the time the Council realized what was happening, the Terran fleet had already arrived. And Novrax 5 saw something it had never seen before. The wrath of humanity. The siege of Novrax 5. The moment the Terran fleet exited hyperspace, they attacked. Massive dreadnoughts fired orbital kinetic strikes, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. Ground troops launched before the enemy could even react. Drop pods away. Shock troopers inbound. No survivors. Terran forces stormed the planet, their weapons cutting through enemy lines like fire through dry grass. Elias led the first assault team, his boots slamming against the battlefield as he fired bolt after bolt from his plasma rifle. Move. Take the command center. Alien soldiers tried to resist, but they had never fought humans like this. Humans who weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for revenge. Breaking the Council's will. Deep within the Council's war bunker, Governor Helios Krex, the alien official in charge of Novrax 5, watched in horror as his forces crumbled. This is impossible. A soldier ran in, panting. Governor, we must evacuate. The humans, they're breaking through every defense we have. Then, boom, the bunker doors exploded. And standing in the smoke was Elias Vance. His armor was battle-scorched, his rifle still smoking from the last kill. His eyes burned with fury. Governor Krex stumbled back. Please dash. Elias raised his rifle. You tortured our children, he said, voice ice-cold. Krex fell to his knees. We're only following orders dash. Elias pulled the trigger. Boom. The war for Novrax 5 was over, and humanity had won. Aftermath. The Galactic Council falls. The defeat of Novrax 5 shattered the Galactic Council's authority. Dozens of alien governments surrendered before the Terran Republic could reach them. The Council's leaders fled into exile, and humanity's warning was burned into history. You took our children. You tortured them. You thought we would stay silent. We are human, and we never forget. For the first time in history, aliens feared humanity. Epilogue. A new era begins. Months later, Elias Vance stood on Earth, watching as the rescued children were reunited with their families. The war was over, but humanity had changed. They were no longer just another species in the galaxy. They were a force that could not be challenged. And every alien empire now knew, if you ever harm a human again, you will pay the price in blood. Chapter 4. The End of an Empire. The war had ended, but the scars remained. The Galactic Council, once an unchallenged force that held dominion over countless worlds, was no more. The very institution that had dictated the lives of trillions for millennia had been shattered beyond repair. Its leaders executed, its military fleets either destroyed or surrendered, and its colonies either in chaos or under new Terran management. The war had not just been a fight for survival, nor had it simply been a retaliation. No, it had been a reckoning. A brutal, merciless reminder that humanity was not to be trifled with. That any species, any empire, any force that dared to harm a human child would suffer a fate worse than extinction. The executions of the council leaders had been broadcast across the galaxy in a tribunal unlike anything seen before. Their crimes had been laid bare for all to witness: their abductions, their cruel experiments, their disregard for innocence, and in the end, no one wept for them. The sight of the once mighty leaders trembling before the courts, trying to justify their atrocities, pleading for mercy as the execution orders were read. It had become a symbol of justice, of retribution. The children they had tormented would never see their tormentors again. Justice had been served. No appeals, no second chances. And as the last of them fell before a firing squad, their bodies discarded like the monsters they were, humanity made it clear that the era of galactic tyranny was over. But the war had done more than just eliminate an empire. It had changed the balance of power in the universe forever. The Terran Republic had stepped forward not just as a survivor, but as the new dominant force of the galaxy. The other species, the old civilizations that had once looked down on humans as newcomers, as weaklings, as lesser beings, now looked up to them with either respect or fear. Humanity had proved itself in a way no species ever had before. Not through diplomatic maneuvering, nor through bribery or political schemes, but through sheer, unrelenting force. Through the iron will of a people who refused to be broken. Through the ruthless fury of a species that would rather die than allow a single one of their young to suffer. With the council gone, chaos erupted across the stars. The old galactic governments had relied on the council's iron grip, its unwavering control, and now, with its fall, the smaller factions, the ambitious warlords, the corrupt bureaucrats who had once thrived under its rule began scrambling for power. Civil wars erupted on planets that had once known nothing but peace. Former allies of the council, once proud and powerful, now desperate to keep their crumbling dominions intact, sent emissaries to the Terran Republic, pleading for alliances, seeking guidance, hoping to gain favor from the new rulers of the galaxy. Some came humbly, offering trade, treaties, and peace. Others came with arrogance, expecting negotiations, only to be met with silence, or worse, the roar of Terran warships hovering over their capitals. The message was simple. Humanity had been wronged, and humanity had won. There would be no negotiations, no bargaining. The terms were theirs to dictate. At the heart of this new order, Elias Vance, the man who had started it all, the soldier who had turned human fury into a movement, stood upon the grand stage of the new galactic tribunal, overlooking a vast gathering of leaders, diplomats, and representatives from across the stars. Behind him, massive holographic projections played recordings from Kareth 7, the emaciated faces of the rescued children, the horrifying conditions of the prison, the brutal reality of what had been done. Every being in that room knew why they were there. Every being knew what had happened. And every single one of them knew that what happened next would define the future of the galaxy. Elias spoke. His voice was not one of a politician, nor of a ruler seeking approval. It was the voice of a man who had seen innocence trampled, who had witnessed the depths of cruelty, and who had led an army to burn that cruelty to the ground. Humanity did not seek this war. We did not invade without cause. We did not destroy without reason. You all saw what the council did. A deep silence filled the chamber. They took our children. They tortured them. They treated them like cattle, like experiments, like things. And they thought we would be too weak, too afraid, too insignificant to fight back. His hands clenched into fists. They were wrong. And if there is anything you take away from this moment, it is this: humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. And if any power in this galaxy, any power at all, thinks that they can one day do to us what was done on Kareth 7, then let this war serve as a warning. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the bones of everyone present. Because if we ever have to remind you again, we will not stop at one world. We will burn your entire civilization to ash. No one spoke. No one dared. Then, one by one, the alien leaders stood, and they bowed. Not out of submission, not out of obedience, but out of fear. The galaxy had changed. The old order had fallen. The new order had arrived. And at its center humanity reigned supreme. Epilogue. The Age of Terran Dominion. Months passed. Then a year. Then two. The galaxy adapted to the new reality, but it was a reality shaped by human hands. The old laws of the Council were abolished, replaced with the Terran Charter, a new system of governance enforced by the Terran Republic and its unshakable military presence. No longer were humans seen as just another species. They were the species. The ones who had toppled an empire, rewritten the rules, and forged a future with blood and steel. Elias Vance became more than just a soldier. He became a legend. Statues of him were raised in every human colony. The children he had rescued grew up knowing his name as more than just a hero. He was their savior. His words were studied in military academies. His tactics became the standard for future Terran operations. His warning to the universe? It became law. And though he never sought power, never claimed the title of emperor or supreme leader, he did something far greater. He ensured that no human child would ever be taken again. Because from that moment on, the galaxy knew. Mess with humanity, and you don't just face war. You face extinction. And so, the stars continued to burn, but never again with the cries of stolen children. Because the last species to make that mistake had already been erased. And the universe never forgot.